A very good afternoon to all of you. I am Anand, welcome you all on behalf of Solar Quarter and First View Group to our first day of Africa Rooftop Solar Congress 2022. Hope you had a good time networking with your peers today. We will have those networking sessions again at the end of the session. Now, we will be playing a sponsor video of our platinum partner, Jinko Solar, followed by the video of our gold partner, JA Solar.
From the native land of China to all corners of the world. From the seaside to the mountain tops. From the peaceful countryside to the bustling city. JA Solar is dedicated to the great cause of energy transition and innovation, a great journey that never stops. Driven by the concept of customer first and mutual value, JA Solar continues forging ahead. Dreams give us the power to imagine. Reality keeps us grounded, anchored in the present era and focusing on high-quality green development. JA Solar aims to unbundle the majesty of sunlight emanating in the universe and shapes this infinite energy into a road of new greatness by repurposing it for a higher calling. Beginning in 2005 when it was established, accelerating in 2007 when it was listed on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange in the US, and maturing in 2019 when it successfully relisted on the Shenzhen A-Shares Exchange. JA Solar has written a magnificent history through the powerful currents of those times. Throughout this journey, JA Solar has remained true to its sacred mission: develop solar power to benefit the entire human race, standing bravely on the tide and pressing ahead on firm footing. After steadily developing and improving over more than a decade, JA Solar has continued to build and perfect an integrated manufacturing chain covering silicon wafers, cells, modules, and power plants, all in an effort to achieve a vertical integration of manufacturing and marketing service systems, from the front-end products to the back-end power generation solutions. Innovation promotes advancement. Excellence produces miracles. With insight sharpened by the rapid fluctuations in the global PV market, and adaptability forged by the ever-changing customer demand, JA Solar consistently gets its teams that are never satisfied to pull together and realize a road to stardom in the PV industry. Consistent quality upgrades, interminable cost reduction efforts, and effective process improvements have been the core of our efforts. JA Solar plays an active role in the digital and intellectualized transformation and upgrading, and strives to build a dual mode of intelligent manufacturing and intelligent operation by adopting such advanced technologies as big data, cloud computing, and artificial intelligence, which help to realize intelligent operation and maintenance management and quality control in the production stage, and therefore greatly enhances the security, smartness, reliability, and cost-effectiveness of the operation and maintenance of the solar power station during application stage. On this great journey of bringing grid parity across the PV industry, JA Solar produces premium cells, premium modules, and has developed an independent innovation mechanism by making continuous investment in R&D. By the end of 2019, JA Solar had been issued more than 779 patents based on its leading-edge R&D, maintaining a leading role in driving tremendous development in solar PV technology. On the foundation of leading park cell technology, JA Solar continuously optimizes module types and their component materials in order to keep improving product performance and bring down the overall LCOE for the entire value chain. The next generation of products coming out of R&D are exciting and will further contribute to the industry development. JA Solar's technology roadmap has attached great importance to perfecting the N-type solar cell, whose average conversion efficiency in mass production is estimated to exceed 25% by the end of 2019 fiscal year. JA Solar's cumulative solar module shipments exceeded 45 gigawatts, of which high-efficiency park product has totaled 13 gigawatts, guaranteeing highly reliable components in power plants with different applications, therefore achieving enhanced financial returns for the power station owners. From China to the world, JA Solar is focused on bringing more light and hope to the entire human race, anchored in its foundation to build a road to prosperity within and beyond the borders. For more than 10 years, JA Solar has explored and succeeded to expand the overseas market, establish a global network of support, distribution, and world-class technical service. Presently, JA Solar manages 12 manufacturing sites and over 30 subsidiaries across the globe. Our high-quality products have been sold to more than 120 countries and regions, with overseas shipments accounting for nearly 75% of our overall sales. JA Solar's module shipments rank first class perennially all over the world. JA Solar maintains steady and responsible growth in its global market share. As a reward for its many years of hard work, JA Solar has been on the list of Fortune China 500 and Global Top 500 New Energy Enterprises for many consecutive years. JA Solar has won many awards from respectable international authorities, such as International Leading Brand PV Module Bankability, Global Tier 1 PV Module Supplier, Europe Top Brand PV Modules. These validate JA Solar as the world's leader in the core technology and quality of PV products. We toil and sweat, we smile and persevere. We remain true to our original aspiration and keep our mission firmly in mind. We lay a road of sincerity that goes deep into our customer's heart. JA Solar, core value of putting customers first and continuously improving its service, tirelessly enhancing its quality, and seeking more sustainable production. Every technical process, every finished product, and lot that ships out all bring out the best. JA Solar and its goal of pursuing ingenuity, modesty, and excellence. driven by a professional attitude of zero tolerance to quality defects. JA Solar carries out real-time and full process inspection on module production, and naturally its module products are accredited by the global certification and accreditation authorities to guarantee zero defects and long-run reliability. JA Solar is focused not only on the successful project-by-project supply, but also on the total life cycle of product, which is supported by its professional capability matrix. Today, in order to grasp the opportunities of the new PV era, JA Solar keeps an open mind and maintains a resolutely international outlook, constantly improving the sales and service network for the global market. JA Solar has played a large part in such monumental large-scale ground-mounted solar power projects as China Datong Photovoltaic Top Runner Power Demonstration Project, China Qinghai UHV Yellow River Hydropower Project, Dubai Electricity and Water Authority, US Utah, Pakistan Punjab, etc. And also played a big role in the world-famous landmarks such as China Beijing's Daxing International Airport, Marina Bay Sands Singapore, the Swedish Royal Palace, Audi Hungary factory, and many others. JA Solar has established strategic partnerships with many top enterprises in the world, while its number of customers across the globe has been over 33,000. JA Solar is fully aware that a company mission is not only to strive to pursue its economic growth, but also tirelessly try its best to meet its social responsibility obligations as well. Ever since its foundation, JA Solar, filled with gratitude, has been playing an active role in social and public welfare causes, endeavoring to provide green impetus for the happiness of more people. Time does not stand still and is the only non-renewable resource. Standing at the starting point of a new era, JA Solar will undertake 5 development strategies: market globalization, product value realization, capital securitization, management digitalization, enterprise platformatization, and work with business partners to build an ecosystem of intergrowth, regeneration, and symbiosis. JA Solar is committed to the cause of benefiting the whole world with this green energy source. What will the future hold? Standing firmly on the tide of energy revolution, JA Solar will adhere to the course of put customers first, respect shareholders' interests, let our employees grow, have keen insight into the ever-changing world situation, and keep pace with time along the grand journey of globalization. Pull together and strive forward dreams and the great vision. Being a great enterprise, the green mission, develop solar power to benefit the entire human race. Harvest the sunshine. JA Solar.
So now it's time to start with our conference. But before that, I take the pleasure to thank our partners for extending their immense support to organize this event. So starting with our platinum partner, Jinko Solar, gold partner, JA Solar, supporting partners, Kenya Renewable Energy Association, Uganda National Renewable Energy and Energy Efficient Alliance, and Uganda Solar Energy Association. Now, let me quickly take you through the agenda for today. We will be having 2 sessions today. Our first session will be on CEO and government talk, regulation and landscape. And after that, in our second session, you'll hear our experts panelists discuss about the technology advancements, constructing profitable projects and assessing viability with storage. And now, without any further delay, let's begin our first session. And this session will be starting with a sponsor presentation by Mr. Victor Musau, Technical and Marketing Manager, Africa, JA Solar. Over to you, sir. You can share your screen.
Hello everyone, my name is Victor Mosau. I'm a technical and marketing manager with JA Solar. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm happy to be part of this wonderful congress. Um, to begin my presentation, um, I would like just to look about four things. Why JA Solar, an overview of our rooftop solar market here in Africa, and just a guide or things to look at when selecting the right module for your project, for your rooftop project, and also some of the best practices that you can employ in your project. Sorry for that. JA Solar was founded in the year 2005, and it's a Fortune 500 company listed in China. We have around 11% global market share, and cumulatively, as of 2022, 2021 Q2, we managed to ship around 73 gigawatts globally, and we have around 33,000 customers worldwide, and around 25,000 employees, and 12 manufacturing bases globally. Now, why JA Solar? Number one, we believe that as JA, we are a reliable partner, and our products have been approved and have received international accreditation by various bodies that are active in the renewable energy sector. As a company, we've won the top brand PVCL for more than 6 years, as you can see in my presentation.
Excuse me,
And
sir. Sorry to interrupt. Your slides are not changing. Can you? Are you in slideshow mode? Yes. Now it has changed. I think
it's changing now.
yes, sir. It's changing now.
Um,
Uh, yeah.
Now it's changing.
No, sir.
I think let me not go to presentation mode. Um, Now it's changing.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, should I begin again?
So you can start from slide number 4.
Okay, thank you. Why JA Solar? As I mentioned, JA, we believe that we are a reliable partner. We've been around since 2005, and we have a significant production capacity of 40 gigawatts when it comes to the PV modules. We have around 30 gigawatts when it comes to cell modules, and around 30 gigawatts when it comes to wafers. As, as a company, we managed to have more than 50 gigawatts field data. This comes from projects that are located in various places globally. And this data, we find it very useful. It shows how our products are yielding and also performing in various parts of the globe. As JA, we are also a top three largest capacity deployed company. If you check the reports for shipments for last year, we emerged number two in terms of global shipments. And that tells us that our customers globally are confident with our products. As I mentioned also earlier, we have been awarded by the top brand PVC for more than 6 consecutive times. And our products have also been given 100% bankability. So that means that they are reliable and you can use them in your project. Number two, as JA, we are a leader in technology. We always believe being always at the forefront of technology. We are the first company to supply PID resistant modules, and also the first farm in the world to mass produce high efficiency monopack panels with multiple bus bars, and also using the gallium doped technology um, panels. Thirdly, as JA, we have a huge product portfolio. We have PV panels ranging all the way from 345 to 605, both in bifacial and monofacials. As you can see, also we have some of our panels that are using the 158 wafer, and these ones they are suitable for distribution markets, and they are tailored towards residential and also commercial rooftops. And in this family, we normally call it the deep blue 1.0. You can achieve all the way up to 455 watt peak. We also have another product basket that we call the Deep Blue 2.0. This one uses the 166 wafer. And in this family, you can achieve all the way up to 470 watts. And the efficiency here is around 21.2. And also now this product also is also tailored towards the residential and commercial rooftops. We also have a utility scale product range, that is the Deep Blue 3.0 and Deep Blue 3.0 Pro. Now this one now ranges from 525 all the way to 605. And in this, we are using the 182 wafers, and this family is geared towards addressing the utility scale projects and also a bit of some of the commercial and industry projects. Now, about the solar rooftop overview here in Africa, just some key facts about Africa. Africa, we are the second largest and also the second most populous continent in the world. And we have a growing population and also a lot of growth in terms of urbanization. And in most countries here in Africa, we're experiencing economic growth, mainly due to political stability. That means that most of these countries, you have good space to live, to work, and also investors are confident to invest. And also, so this means that a lot of local investors and also foreign investors are interested in various projects here in Africa, and they are continuing to invest. Another thing that has been also very significant and also that has led to this economic growth is a human capital transformation. If you see the kind of education systems we have, the number of people that are going through the education systems that we have in Africa, the numbers are promising. And that means that we have good human capital to transform our continent. Now, also in Africa, also we can also take note that our power demand is growing, mainly because of population and also because of social and economic growth. And also we can also note that the access to electricity, it's still below 50% in most of the countries. And that means that we have a huge opportunity, a huge gap that needs to be addressed. And take into mind that Africa, as a continent, we have the richest solar resource on the planet compared to other places in the world. In this regard, also as JA, we've managed to deploy over 1 gigawatt solar modules here in Africa in various projects, in various parts in the north, the south, in the east, in the west. So we have some of the projects that are already live using our modules. Now, Africa rooftop solar sector in Africa. I think if you saw the AFSIA Outlook report for 2022, I think you might have noted that in Africa the total installed solar capacity is around 8.7 gigawatts. Although I saw the reports for IRENA, the numbers are a bit higher than this one. And in the CNI sector, which mostly covers the rooftop projects, the total operational installed projects is around 717, which is slightly below the 1 gigawatt. And what is promising is that the size of the CNI projects that are now either in discussion or in progress, you can see they are ranging from, we have an average of the mid-size from 200 kilowatt all the way to slightly over a megawatt. And this is a very good sign in this sector. Now, the CNI sector in Africa is growing, and it's very important to note that most of these projects, they are normally hosted by customers, and most of the customers will finance them, and the electricity that is generated in this project is consumed by the customer. So that means that we have very little or few paperwork compared to solar power plants that are designed to sell the energy to the main grid. And also, just to note that also in terms of power generation permits for self-consumptions, for small to medium self-consumptions in many African markets, there is no license that is required, although in some places you are not allowed to sell to a third party. And this is leading to significant growth in the CNI solar sector. And some of the reason why customers in the CNI are now installing solar is to save on electricity. I think here in Kenya, I've seen a lot of industries installing solars in their rooftop, and just to supplement and also to cut costs when it comes to generation costs compared to electricity costs. The other important reason is that they would like to also improve their power supplies and also reduce the cost of diesel fuels. This is also, we've seen this one in countries where the grid is not very stable. There are a lot of power cuts. So you've seen a lot of customers and install hybrid systems that are combining solar and um, diesel generators. Another very important reason is that uh, most of these also commercial and industry customers, they want to attain their green energy targets. And just this one is leading to a very important growth in the sector. Now, how do you choose your right PV modules for your rooftop? I think this is a section that many of the EPCs or project designers will 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 agree with me in regards to some of these things. You have so many considerations to look for when you're doing your solar rooftop project. I just want to take to talk about two. I know there's a lot you can say about the solar modules, the rooftop, the inverters, the mounting structures, but I will, because of time, I'll just take to two, stick to two. And number one, now when selecting the solar panels, just to note that rooftops, the amount of space may not be much. So you need a module that is compact. So that means that you can fit more panels. You also need a module that is in good weight, so that because you are going to install it and also handle it at an height. So you need a module that is light, and also you're also going to factor in the additional weight you're going to add on the roof. You also need a module that has a good balance of size and power, that is in terms of the power efficiency, and also a module that is compatible with the choice of inverters that you are going to be using for your system. Also, you also need to check for the availability of the panels, also availability of technical support, especially in the installation and also the after sales technical support. You also need to check also on the manufacturer's warranties on the panels that you are going to be using for your project. And these are very key and also useful information that you need to be aware of. Also on this, you also need to check the technology of the panels that you're installing on your roof, because you find that some panels will perform better when shaded. Some uh, panels, like if they are using the half cell technology, they are bit in terms of performance, they are better compared to full cells when it comes to shading. And and this is very key if you're working on rooftops with multiple orientations and shading from either a nearby building or at the pitches of your roof. Also, on the rooftop, it's also important to look at the available roof area. And on this point, depending on how you are sizing or you are designing your project, if you are designing your project to meet the energy demand of your customer, and you have more than enough roof, you can there's a lot of leeway there. But if the energy demand of the customer is high and the roof is it's limited. I think there you need to go with a good panel, with a good size, and with a good balance of power and efficiency to mean that you can generate more from that roof. You also need to, on the roof area, you also need to check, and also in your design to factor in things like walkways for easy operation and maintenance of your design of your system. You also need to work closely with the mechanical engineer of the building where you're doing your project, just to make sure that whatever system you're installing on your roof, um, the roof structure or this is able to support that additional PV weight. Also, you also need to check the orientations of your roof. Especially this one will be very key. If you have a roof with more than more than two orientations, then means that when you come into choosing your inverter, especially when you're using string inverters, you need to check the number of MPPTs that your inverter has uh, to make sure that you're compliant with the generation from all the orientations of the roof. Also, something that is very important is the roofing materials. I think it is recommended that you check for roofing materials. You install your project in roofing materials which are resistant to fire, and you make sure that there's adequate spacing and ventilation between the panels and the back of the panels and the roof. And also, you make sure that your installations are compliant with the fire safety of the building, because in case of fire, then it becomes a challenge to put it off. Now, in terms of the panels, I think there are two important things that determine the electrical and the mechanical properties of a panel, and that is the wafer size that is used and the number of cells in each of these panels. Just to highlight some of our products, here is in JA, we have panels that are using the 158 wafer, and you can have them either as a 60 cell or a 72 cell. In this slide, I just want to show some of the important aspects that we check, and this data is normally provided and available in the data sheets. If you can see the 158 wafer, you can have it, you can have a panel of 60 cell, you can have a panel of 72 cell. And depending on that configuration, you can see the voltages and the currents will vary. So sometimes you find that a customer will tell you, I want like a 400-watt panel. Um, Many times, it is important to explain to the customers the types of what is the technology of the panels, which wafer is it using, because these details, especially on the current and the voltage, they are very important when you're selecting your PV inverter. And if you're doing a residential installation where you have to use a separate charge controller, uh, the voltage and the current uh, requirements of the charge controller will determine the panel you choose. Basically, all these panels can be used in a rooftop project based on depending on the scale and also depending on the availability of things like inverters. Something else very important to note is also the weight of the panels. Um, if you're designing your rooftop project, and you're given maybe by the structural engineer how much weight you can add per square meter of your roof. Now that will also guide you to know which panels, which module to go with. Also, something else is also very important is the packaging of these same panels in a container. Because if you can have more panels in a container, that means the transport cost per watt is very minimum. And we have a very interesting product that is using the 182 wafer. It's called JM54S30. In this product, we can fit up to 936 modules in a 40-foot container. And one of the reasons why this is, it comes with a thinner frame, not compromising also on the mechanical strength of the panel. So this product has been tailored to address the residential solar and also commercial and industrial roof project sector. So depending on the choice of inverter you are using, you can either go for 158 wafer, depending on also on the size of the product that you're doing, you can go also with a 182 wafer. I think here the choice lies with the EPC or the project designer. Just to highlight some of the best practices, and most of this information is normally provided for by the manufacturers in the manuals that are given. I think many of these things we know them, but it doesn't harm to repeat them because of their importance. Number one, I think we all know that the PV modules they normally don't come with an on-off switch, and once they're exposed to the sunlight, they are started generation. And especially when you're doing longer streams, then you need to use proper tools when handling these modules under sunshine, under sunlight. Also, we need to ensure that we use proper components, appropriate components throughout your system, because you can have a good module, but if you use the wrong fuses, circuit breakers, at the end of the day, the project will have issues. Also, it's also important to note that in each panel, the mounting holes for mounting the PV, for grounding the PV, for draining the PVs, they are normally provided for by the manufacturers. And I've checked across also with the competition, all these things are normally provided. So it's not allowed to drill on either on the glass or on the frame because it voids the warranty. Also, something else that is very important is how you arrange your PV supports, rails, and also your mid clamps. Also determines the mechanical load performance of your panels. And um, in the installation manuals, this information is normally given, and I think this one cuts across all tier one global PV manufacturers. They will show you some of the mounting styles that have been tested and what numbers in terms of top weight and also back cover weight that the panel can handle. And it's also very good to comply to that. Also, it's also very important to study manuals that are normally provided by the manufacturer, especially cleaning methods of solar modules. This information is normally provided for by manufacturers. Also, installation manuals, the best practices that you're supposed to employ, which type of clamps, which types of bolts you're supposed to use, the amount of torque that is required. All this information is normally captured in the installation manuals. And also, something else that is very important is also how you're going to handle your modules, from offloading to storage, how you're supposed to start them, how you're supposed to transport them in the construction site. This information is very important. And if you conversant with this information and you follow it to the latter, then that means at the end of the day, you will have quality installation and you will meet your customer requirement and the customer will be happy. And that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I'm grateful and thankful for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this insightful presentation. Now it's time to begin the first panel discussion, which is on CEO and government talk, regulation and landscape. And to discuss this, we have in the panel with us Mr. Shegun Adaju, CEO Consistent Energy Limited and President Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. Mr. Daniel Pasker, Sales Manager, Southern Africa, JA Solar. Mr. Geoffrey Ronoho, Co-founder and Director of GEN. Mr. Dan Click, CEO, East African Power. Mr. Martin Bard, CEO, Ecoligo. The session will be led by Ms. Chanda, Director, Hermanton Renewables. A note to all our attendees, please post all your questions in Q&A box. Our panelists will take them at the end of the session. Now, I welcome all the panelists on the screen and handing it over to Chanda ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thanks, Anand. I gave him permission to not try the surname because it's taken me a long time to learn how to pronounce it. thanks to everyone for joining us. And that was an interesting introduction. And at the beginning, talking about what the installed capacity is currently for rooftop solar around the continent. So as we exit, hopefully, fingers crossed, the COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately, the continent has regressed slightly in terms of electrification levels. Looking at the IEA World Energy Outlook, there's around 600 million people across the continent without access to electricity. We have on top of that then the commercial and industrial sector, which accounts for about 75% of the demand across sub-Saharan Africa. And if you're sitting in Johannesburg like me, you're being hit by load shedding at the minute because Eskom has a lot of power plants that are offline at the minute. So commercial and industrials hit by load shedding, intermittent power, issues with security of supply. So what we're going to try and discuss with our panel of CEOs and representatives of various organizations across the continent is what we should be looking at in order to firstly improve our goal towards universal access and meeting some of those sustainable development goals, but also the requirement to speed up rooftop solar installations for the CNI sector. So what I'm going to do is first ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and a little bit about the organizations that they represent. And then from that, I will try and bombard you with some questions. So just in order of who I can see on the screen, if we can start with you, Dan Klink, please.
Thanks, Shanda, for the introduction. And just to note, I'm the founder and CEO for East African Power. We have been based in Rwanda for a decade. We are a engineering and development company focused on hydro and solar. We have our base in Rwanda, but are operating and developing projects in 7 other countries with 300 megawatts in various stages of development. Rooftop solar is a small segment of our business in EPC, but very glad to share our experience here in the smaller Rwandan market, and of course highlight our passion as a company to see SDG 7 realized and our focus to develop 1 gigawatt by 2030. Thanks for the introduction to the panel today.
Thanks, Dan. I will go to Martin next, please.
Sure. My name is Martin. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ecoligo. My background is in the solar industry for the past 16 years, always focusing on sort of remote and off-grid power systems and emerging markets. And I founded Ecoligo around 6 years ago with the goal to provide fully financed solar solutions for the commercial and industrial space on a global level. So while we are active in East Africa and West Africa, we are also active outside of the African continent. We have offices in South America and Central America, as well as in Southeast Asia. And we have currently 65 megawatts of signed projects and a pipeline of around 1 gigawatt of solar rooftop systems only.
Thanks, Martin. Jeffrey, you next, please.
Thank you, Chanda, and good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here. Good to see some familiar faces on the screen and also on the participants. My name is Jeffrey Rono. I am a co-founder and director at Ofgem Limited. We are based out of Nairobi and serving the East African and Southern African markets from Nairobi. We are an EPC, a developer, and financier also in the C&I market, what we call C&I market here, which represents the rooftop, carports, ground-mounted solar plants. We also do implement battery-based solutions for industrial customers in East Africa. So it will be a pleasure today to share our experience from how we see things here and hear what the others have to say. Thank you. Back to you, Chanda.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Daniel Pasca, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Pasca. I'm the sales manager for Southern Africa at JA Solar. So JA Solar is a tier 1 solar PV module manufacturer. operating out of China, but we have multiple, factories globally. We have about 1 gigawatt of solar PV modules implemented throughout Africa, but we should essentially be doubling that by the end of 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, second.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Chanda. Good to see you again. Yeah, my name is Shegun. I'm from Nigeria. I run a company called Consistent Energy. We're focused on rooftop solar, basically for productive use and also households, ready to displace a huge number of generators that we have in Nigeria. We're also making gradually an inroad into the C&I space because the numbers are looking better every day. I also have the privilege of overseeing the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria as the president. I'm happy to be part of this discussion this afternoon.
Thanks, second. So what I suggest is maybe we'll take each of the regions and have a bit of an overview of the landscape, and then, not to be too controversial, then chat about the regulatory framework and suggestions that everybody has. So I think between Dan Klink and Jeffrey, Dan, maybe you start, and you said the organization's been in existence for 10 years. How have things changed? What are you seeing on the ground in terms of the landscape for rooftop solar in East Africa?
Great. Happy to start off by painting what the landscape looked like 10 years ago. and of course, there was a first small solar installation on a mountaintop in Kigali that had about 250 kilowatts. And back in 2014, the first kind of larger utility scale solar power project was realized thanks to Gigawatt Global and the majority investor, Scatec, 8.5 megawatts. Our team had the pleasure to be the local partner and contractor for that, doing the civil works, the electrical, mechanical, and been doing the O&M support to Scatec for the past 8 years. So we've had a kind of a hands-on experience of what it's looked like. Of course, the national grid was 60% dependent on diesel, thermal, a decade ago. So a lot has changed over the last few years in the landscape of what's been happening with access to electricity, which was at 15% then, which is standing today at 60%. And Rwanda is well on its way to achieve universal access by 2025. So it's a very exciting period for Rwanda, and of course how that gap is being filled by kind of grid, off-grid solutions, mini grids. And it's quite a dynamic market over here, and it's a much smaller market than, of course, where Segun is operating in Nigeria. And so when we talk about kind of the total installed capacity in Rwanda, just slightly over 200 megawatts, and by 2025 we're moving towards 500. And the market reality of what we're faced with in Rwanda is that supply will outstrip demand by about 25%. And so what this does is it actually motivates the utility to have industrial pricing quite low to attract industry into the market. And of course, if you're looking from a private or a C&I perspective, it's very hard to compete if the utility is selling power at 10 cents. Of course, there's kind of a gap in the commercial levels that might be selling at 15 to 20 cents. So there's not a ton or a large market, to be had in Rwanda. There'll only be, maybe 10 to 20 more mini grids kind of built over the next 3 years, maybe another 5% of the total market. And it's such a small country that the grid is rapidly moving out. And so I think, from a policy perspective, the government doesn't want, C&I competing with its larger clients. And so what we'll naturally see is that there's a cap. And so in Rwanda, there's a 50 kilowatt cap. And that will probably stay in place for at least another couple years. And as that supply-demand balance comes closer, we'll naturally see that kind of cap evolve to about 500 kilowatts, and then likely by the end of the decade, moving up to about 1 megawatt. So in the C&I space, it's a smaller market that's here. We're quite active. 8 installations. We'll probably hit 20 before the end of this year, just in Rwanda, and not including what we're doing into the region. But that to say, Rwanda is doing a great job at hitting its SDG 7 targets, which is wonderful. And then looking at kind of the total size of the Rwandan market is night and day if you compare that with the Nigerian market or some of our neighbors that are from here. But happy to highlight, or take any questions about where things are coming in from the policy perspective or where those discussions take place. What's nice in Rwanda is that, and then having spent a decade, is that the private sector is invited into those policy making decisions. And from, we founded an energy And it's nice because with our energy working group, we can kind of monitor the performance of private sector companies in close proximity with the different ministry or government stakeholders to see, how are we achieving this together and in partnership, and what role does the private sector have? And if there are going to be gaps in the private sector's capacity to deliver, what is the government planning to do to kind of step in and ensure that we hit universal access to power? So one question is about the access, and of course is about the affordability. So again, competing in the industries, or industrial pricing at 10 cents, it's very difficult. But in the commercial levels, there are still kind of good pockets of opportunity that exist, that keeps our team busy. But of course, the majority of our growth as a company, about 95% is outside of Rwanda. But we love to be based in this country. But happy to take any or field any questions today with regards to the Rwandan market, the approach, size of the market, what's taking place, and how the government looks at the different policies on kind of a 6 months kind of moving target base, especially in its least cost power development plan.
Thank you. I'm hoping that, and so to everyone watching, please feel free to ask questions, and it helps the discussion if you participate in what we're talking about. So please shout and ask questions. But and to the other speakers, if you want to add anything, then also feel free. I'm just going to jump over to Jeffrey. I think there's a couple of things that you said in there which I think are interesting. So a lot of the developers who've been successful around the continent tend to be kind of international companies that are coming in. So I think interesting from your perspective as a locally based company, and if with Jeffrey as a locally based company, what is required to build the SMMEs that are in the market and companies that are growing into the rooftop space locally. I think that is one interesting discussion. And then the second, for whoever wants to jump in, is this question of cost-reflective tariffs and grid availability, which is a hot topic here in South Africa, with a lot of the tariffs being raised regularly between 15 and 20% a year. So the regulatory push is slightly less necessary, and it's more of an economic push. But where the costs are 10 cents, probably more of a regulatory push needed. So Jeffrey,
thanks, Chanda. So I mean, in terms of Kenya and where Kenya stands now, and also looking at where it came from, I think since the 80s and 90s, solar home systems for homes was very popular in Kenya, and it's been the market leader even up to now in terms of solar home systems. I think comparing to India and Nigeria in terms of that market scale. So we're still the market leader. Adoption of technology has been the forefront of in Kenya. But in the C&I market, which we operate in, I think it was only until 2012 when we had the solar PV regulations, which sought to sort of put order in the sector in terms of determining who can be an installer, who can be a designer, who can be an importer of solar panels. Those regulations came in, and also given the high grid prices we see in Kenya and power instability, the C&I market took shape. I would say it took time. I would say from 2012 to 2017, there were very few pilot projects being implemented. But since 2017, we've seen the market grow rapidly. We expect this year to hit even up to 100 megawatts of C&I installations. Compare that to our grid. Our grid is about 2 gigawatts or so, which is mostly also green, supplied by geothermal, hydro, wind, and now more of solar actually. So we have 2 solar plants which are online now, about 100 megawatts on the utility scale side of things. So the market is picking up. It's active. So many new players coming in, as you have said. We are proud that we are amongst the very few local developers, local players in the market who have been here since the beginning, and also happy to be part of the sector now as the sector picks up. What issues we see and what challenges we see? You talk about the issue of tariffs, and for us, of course, our customers are attracted to our solutions because of the tariffs. So this year we saw a sudden drop in the tariffs, and like other countries in Africa, we're seeing a drop driven by the government of Kenya, and they passed a regulation, or actually passed a mandate that the tariffs have come down now by 15% beginning of January. So down from 18 cents, 18 US cents for your typical industrial customer to about 15 or so US cents now. We may expect further a decrease in that tariff because the government is very keen on seeing low prices. But we wonder whether this is really market reflective, because on the other hand, the utility is really struggling to provide stable power to maintain its network. So we think the downside here is that we'll see more blackouts and more brownouts and more instabilities going forward because of that issue. So here again, politics taking going in front of what is reality on the ground. So that has been a challenge, though. On one hand, on the other hand, also most customers are still yet to really, I would say, comprehend grid-tie solutions and the reason and why they cannot achieve more. Some would like to go off grid, but they still find battery prices quite expensive, and therefore the technology is still not yet there in terms of meeting the customer needs. So solar PV is now affordable, batteries are still not yet there. So most customers achieve 30%, 40% solar penetration. Some would like to see higher than that, but it's just not possible in the current economic situation. And of course, finally, I would say in Kenya, there isn't any net metering or that kind of regulation to allow a customer. Actually, first of all, there isn't any regulation so far to actually feed in or to even interconnect to the grid. So it is still a very gray area. We are waiting for some policy to come out this year to clarify that. We think the cap will be at 1 megawatt. So below 1 megawatt, you may not need to do a lot of paperwork. Beyond a megawatt, there may be a lot of paperwork involved. So there's still some gray areas in the Kenyan market, which we do expect some clarity this year. Of course, there's the permitting, which is there in terms of the municipality or the environment regulation agency. Those are there, but in terms of tying into the grid and what you need to do, notifying the grid operator, that's still not very clear in Kenya. So we hope to see that going forward, over and above net metering regulations, which we think can expand our market and even double it. Because at the moment, most customers curtail their power plants in case the solar plant produces more than they can consume. So in a nutshell, that's what we see. So basically, a growing market, few challenges, but we still think the outlook is quite positive going forward. Back to you, Chanda.
Yeah, it seems a crazy situation, doesn't it, that you have blackouts, but we're curtailing usage when there is power available. There's a question here, and I think I'll address it to both of you because I think it follows on from what you're saying as well, Jeffrey. So to Dan, in your utility work, do you see policies that incentivize the inclusion of storage, such as time of supply pricing? And maybe then once Dan has answered that, Jeffrey, if you can just chat about what you're seeing in the storage space for storage in the CNI rooftop space as well.
Well, definitely the opportunity of this upcoming decade, and of course, as you move along with the discussions of the reliability of power and of course the cost of adding in that storage, then your value proposition when the policies aren't in place, you're looking at something that's much costlier. And so with regards to just the market in the short term, is that I doubt that we're going to see incentives put into place but probably between kind of a 2025 to 2030 scenario in the least cost power development plan, that those incentives will be brought along for storage, and then reducing the grid losses that we're facing. And again, as Jeffrey had mentioned about kind of the net metering policy, it's maybe kind of a bit new into East Africa, and we're seeing that it's going to take still another kind of 3 to 4 years before we are able to move that along in Rwanda, so it's going to take a bit of time. I wish those things were in place, and certainly it's just a kind of a matter of time before that matures, and I think that we're seeing the market shift to that, and as well as that for kind of larger clients, it's about the reliability for their power and their operations. So I think we'll see storage solutions uptake by the private sector first, and then we'll see kind of how that kind of comes into place from a utility side within Rwanda.
Thanks, Dan. Jeffrey, do you want to jump in on the CNI space? And then...
Yes. So very quickly. So, I mean, indeed, if the question is if the issue is now what time of use, so in Kenya we do have that, so daytime and nighttime tariffs, but the economic benefit of it is still not very apparent to our customers. So it's quite confusing, and I think what is actually required in Kenya now is just simplifying that, how you qualify for that reduced tariff overnight. It's a very complex way to calculate it, so a number of our customers are very confused about it. But they do meet up based on daytime and nighttime, but the tariff is not much different. Whether it will lead to high adoption of battery-based systems, I think the issue is not that, because cost of PV electricity is lower, much lower than the grid. So if the cost of batteries was affordable, economical, customers will still do it either way without the nighttime tariff being low. So I don't see it as a key driver at the moment. More important is just the cost of batteries to come down. That would be my view.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Martin, I'm going to use you as a bridge between East and West, since you have operations in both. So if you could just maybe add on to anything that you want to about East Africa, and then what you're seeing in West Africa.
Sure. I mean, our experience is that globally speaking, even the clearer regulation is, the easier it is to actually implement projects, because we have sort of a safeguard in terms of our investments. The customer have safeguards in terms of understanding how the projects work, and that provides usually clarity in the market, helping us to implement CNI projects. Unfortunately, in some of the markets, that clarity is not given. In Kenya, the net metering is actually a perfect example. It has been in discussion since 2012. And every year we hear next year it's about to get implemented. And so that hovering around is obviously something where customers then wait until they make a decision, because they could actually provide for a much larger system on their roof, right? So these uncertainties are what are causing us as an investor into these projects really some headache. And some of these regulations are well defined. They are giving clarity, and some others not so much. And that is actually true in Ghana as much as it is in Kenya. It just affects different regulations. Yeah. And I think if we're talking about sort of speeding up the adoption of the technology and making sure that African businesses can benefit from low-cost solar energy, then the regulators and the governments must ensure that there's a clear pathway when it comes to regulation that really provides some long-term stability, so that it's clear for investors as much as for customers, what am I getting myself into if I sign up for a 20-year power purchase agreement? And can I be sure that regulation is supportive of this, and not just until the next election, right? Because that's what we're facing, unfortunately, in some of the markets as well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, a good example and it's on the utility scale, but in the South African market, at the difference in the tariffs from round 1 to round 5 is, you know, several 100% of a drop, and it's purely because of that market certainty that you have a government-backed guarantee and you know the regulatory environment that you're playing in. Martin, there's a question here from Patricia. Most African countries, most people do not have a decent income to afford the high solar power capital to access clean solar power. How is your company's experience in Rwanda and making sure that you widen up the market?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, for our company, we really focus on commercial and industrial systems. So that's not really about the people and the population, but ensuring that businesses can have access. And we provide them with a solution whereby the cost of solar power is cheaper per kilowatt hour unit compared to the national tariff. And we can do that because we obviously let them sign up to like long-term power purchase agreements. But in terms of the population and making sure that there's a wider market adoption, I think a lot of the pay-go solar providers now also have really well-functioning finance models whereby the customers can adopt and don't have to actually invest upfront the high cost, because we all know it's just about the high upfront investment, right? In the long term, you always save money. And I don't know any players in Rwanda, particularly in this space, but I'm very certain that there are quite a few.
Dan, I don't know if you want to add anything on there for Rwanda specific.
Yeah, no, nothing to add on. I mean, as Martin mentioned, it's we see that Bbox and being kind of market leader, Mobisol, now NG, entering that place with those sophisticated financing to help out on the household levels to advance that adoption rates. And there's another kind of 10 to 15 other players that are in that market, but I think it'll be primarily dominated by those that can provide financing. Such as Ignite right now actually is coming in with some great financing solutions, and we'll see of course that upfront cost, once it's tackled, then it's clear offset from 20 or 25 cent household tariffs. So it's a great market in that area. That's not a market that EAP is engaged in.
Segun, I'm gonna continue with you and what you're seeing in Nigeria in particular. I think both from your company point of view, but also what the Renewables Association of Nigeria is seeing, and how and the communications with government and lobbying that you're involved in.
Thank you, Chanda. Yes, Nigeria market remains one of the biggest in terms of opportunities for rooftop solar, given the the gap between demand and supply. I mean, out of the 600 million Africans in sub-Saharan Africa that's not having access, I guarantee that by 100 million is from Nigeria. Secondly, the grid is also challenged. So we haven't seen any grid-tied renewables, particularly solar, up until now. There are 14 companies that have been licensed to do that, but for a couple of reasons, no financial close, and also for the overarching issue in the energy space in Nigeria, the issue of illiquidity and cost-reflective tariff. So the grid seems to still be, too cheap compared to, I mean, if you do the LCOE and what people are spending on their generators, and there's a bit of control in terms of regulation of prices in Nigeria currently. So investors are not too motivated really to put in much money on grid power. Meanwhile, on the other side, on the flip side, we're having commercial outfits, even residential households, powering generators. And self-generation is almost 5 times what the grid supplies. I mean, 25, 30 gigawatt of self-generation currently in Nigeria. And if you look at the costs also per kilowatt hour, pretty very higher than the grid. So the issue currently now is competition against diesel and petrol generators, not the grid. Grid is a lot cheaper. Now the market, in view of the way it is right now, is tending towards the adoption of alternatives like rooftop solar. So we're seeing both small businesses. My company, we focus a whole lot on SMEs, productive use of power, small businesses, rural farmers for irrigation, solar drying, and the rest. And we're seeing a whole lot of adoption because the grid is not sufficient for most of these businesses. And you find out that virtually all of them will have one form of generator or the other. So there's a very strong opportunity to displace those generators and replace with solar, with very good business model like financing. And we're seeing a few companies also, both local and international, coming to that space in Nigeria. Now, looking at the commercial and industrial, also that is gaining some traction. So we're seeing the like of cross-boundary, Western Solar, coming into Nigeria and deploying, good roof, CNI solution. For example, there's one by cross-boundary for a top brewing company in Nigeria that's about 650 kilowatt. Okay, and we're seeing so many of others. The regulation in Nigeria allows up to 1 megawatts without licensing. So once you're below that threshold, you could, find a customer, deploy, and the price depends on demand and supply, whatever you agree with your clients. So that is encouraging that push into that market in Nigeria. And we're seeing a lot of inroad also in other options like mini grid. Even the government also putting some money down. For example, there's a World Bank loan of about $550 million, World Bank and African Development Bank through the Rural Electrification Agency, pushing for distributed renewables in Nigeria. So this is what the market looks like. And of course, one other factor that is also pushing this is also the issue of the regulation of the downstream oil and gas. So the government is shying away from removing subsidies. So there's very strong subsidy on petroleum products, okay, diesel, petrol, and the rest. And maybe that's also one of the limiting factors we are facing right now in Nigeria. Once that is fully deregulated, we know that the prices of self-generation from generators will shoot up, and then a lot of people will begin to move to, standalone solution. But we're seeing that's happening very soon. Although it was supposed to take off in 2022, where there will be full deregulation of the downstream sector. The government is, pushing back a little bit, maybe because of forthcoming elections and some other factors. But invariably, Nigeria will have to deregulate the downstream sector and allow the prices of electricity and power in Nigeria to be focused on demand and supply. But it still remains a very viable market where commercial viability has been proven by almost all the players on the distributed energy space. But of course, for the grid, it's still a bit challenging, and it hasn't been able to reach the limits of what it's supposed to. So that's from my own view. I'll be happy to also take some comments around regulation at some time.
Thanks, Segun. I think what I'm hearing from everybody there is that the size of the projects as well is very much governed by not having to go through a licensing process. So that's your your upper limit of the project, that everybody's trying to avoid that lack of clarity, which I think is similar setup here in South Africa. Maybe just between, I think Martin, just feeding off one of Segun's comments, and if you could bring it, what you're seeing outside of Africa in terms of cost reflective tariffs, and is it only on the continent that utilities are fighting against against charging what the power actually costs, or are you seeing that in other regions as well? And then I think I'll hand over to Daniel after that. So Martin, please.
Yeah. In some markets, we see similar situations where the utility has a monopoly and the utility is state-owned or at least co-owned by the government. And wherever that is the case, independent setup regulators that are supposed to obviously provide regulation to the market equally to the involved players in the market, is often biased towards supporting the utility. And that can be seen also in tariffs. Yeah, so oftentimes tariffs are structured in a way that it is difficult for solar to compete because, for example, the commercial and industrial market segments is benefiting from great subsidies that are paid for by the government. And there is oftentimes a mix happening between sort of economic incentives and subsidies to make sure the economy is growing. And the easiest way to do that is to do through electricity pricing, right? Because you can actually reduce the cost for companies. You could reduce the cost for private consumers if you have an election coming up and want a lot of them to vote for you. And so often what we see is that it's not regulated by sort of market situations, right? If we were looking at market situations in Kenya, KPLC should increase their tariffs and should do so significantly because they're still not making money on their tariffs. But it's often a political instrument, and the consequence of that is that markets shift away from being viable for solar, and then it becomes a little bit an issue. But nevertheless, outside of the African continent, in most markets, it's less of an interference with politics and the utilities. And utilities have understood that there is no way around distributed solar. And it will happen at some point anyway, and I can't sort of object against it all the time. So rather than fighting it, they are looking for ways how to participate in the growth and how to make it a business case for their own by building up, for example, a solar division that offers the same as all the other developers and EPCs in the market, or by partnering with large solar companies and doing some revenue share on the sale of the electricity. So I think there's opportunities for the utilities here, not just threats, and that could help the growth of the solar in the long term, definitely.
I think it's often, as you say, seen as a threat, and that solar is stealing their clients, and rather than looking at it as an opportunity to widen your revenue base or just think a little bit outside the box about how you serve clients. This is difficult for big utilities. So I'm going to bring Daniel in, and then if anybody in the audience has other questions, we're going to enter the official Q&A. But Daniel, I think if you could chat through what you're seeing in Southern Africa, but also, yes, as an equipment supplier, what you're seeing across the continent, the types of companies that are getting involved in the rooftop solar space, how that has changed over the past couple of years, growth, sizes of projects, those kind of things.
Sure, 100%. So, I mean, if you have a look at, South Africa specifically, we've had, quite exponential growth in the solar PV space from about 2.5 gigs cumulative PV installation in 2019 to about 4 gigs by the end of 2021. And we're expected to increase that by another 2 gigs by the end of 2022. So, I mean, this growth is brought on by a couple of different factors. Obviously, the minimum threshold being raised from 1 megawatt to 100 megawatts on rooftop installations. That we've definitely seen expansion in the CNI space as well as agricultural mining, and as well as the tariff increases coming into play. So as you said, there's regular tariff increases of 15 to 20% being implemented, and there we've seen the rationale behind it being an economic choice now, forcing CNI and large industrial players to go solar or to implement hybrid systems. Another factor is based on the grid insecurity. Obviously, there's about a 14 gigawatt shortfall at the moment in South Africa, which is obviously contributing to load shedding in the country. So I mean, we've seen a quite a large influx of large-scale batteries being implemented with genset integration and solar PV. So real hybrid concept in that regard. So it's really exciting time to be in the industry. If we have a look, across Africa, we're expecting probably in the region of 4 to 5 gigs to be implemented over this year. So there is, massive growth, and it's all being driven by, prices coming down from manufacturers' side. Raw material costs are dropping. Technology is becoming more efficient and more affordable, easier to install. There's a larger access to these components, throughout Africa at this stage. So we're definitely in the right space, and there's definitely the right time to be in the industry.
Thanks, Daniel. Maybe just on that, and I think everybody's kind of mentioned pipelines and forecasts for the next couple of years. Just an overview of what you're seeing as some of the bottlenecks to actually implementing those forecasts. How has COVID affected your pipeline and project forecasts? So, Daniel, I'll stick with you for a minute, and then I'll go to the other participants.
Sure. So from a supplier point of view, obviously COVID has had quite a big implication on our potential pipelines. Majority of our existing clients had issues with installations and not being able to install on time, and 2021 was not a great year in reality in terms of a lot of issues coming up, such as shipping costs being extremely high, availability of raw materials being very scarce. I mean, all of that has seemed to resolve itself at this stage. Prices are starting to decrease, in the industry at this stage again. So it has been quite a difficult year, but JA Solar has still seen quite prominent growth throughout 2021 at least.
Thanks, and I'll go back to. Let's go back to Dan, because you're at the top of my screen. Maybe just a little bit of feedback on what you've seen.
Yeah, I'll reiterate what Daniel said also. I mean, none of us were, not affected by COVID, and of course the logistics crisis with pricing impact on short-term demand. But in the medium term, I mean, we've seen a great uptick. So we're, have diversified our own development portfolio, especially in the Zim, Malawi, Madagascar, Zambia, and DRC portfolios, and seeing kind of significant growth in that, upwards of 50 megawatts in demand. And so, that's kind of great news of areas of development that we didn't, that previously we had been, more focused on the utility in grid connected. So we've seen kind of a shift in the market a bit, and that's been positive for our medium term. And of course, short term we were hit like everybody else. But it's, we see that right now is just a very good timing for things coming and correcting themselves. And let's hope, before the end of this year, at least, 6 to 9 months, that those, pricing levels can come back down. And of course, we have to monitor what's happening with inflation. And everybody's comfortable with lower pricing, but the reality is that inflation is much higher than expected. And of course, where there's previously agreed prices, there's renegotiations that are taking place that presents its challenges also, where you've got those kind of pre-existing contracts that need to be opened up, inflation concerns. Maybe some others could comment on it in the market, maybe Martin on the financing side of things, but it's something that is challenging to tackle, especially with kind of predicting things out 1 or 2 years. And so I think we'll still see those higher prices take effect, and there'll be a need for a correction, and hopefully more support and lower amounts of financing that can come in globally. But right now, the reality of what we're seeing from inflation is a massive impact in the C&I sector.
I think, Martin, do you want to jump in there on the inflation on the financing side? And then I think one of the things that we often don't talk about is the inflation for O&M costs, because you guys have, as EPC contractors, have forecast various costs and how that impacts you. So I think if you do that, and then also Jeffrey on the O&M side.
Yeah, I think, as rightly said, inflation certainly is a concern, and so are high cost of the supply chains that actually reflect into the turnkey EPC prices at the moment. And we also think that's not going to change this year, the soonest, really at the end of the year. And then if inflation keeps to grow as unpredictable as it did in the last sort of 6 months, then certainly that becomes a really big issue. Yeah. And I think what we are facing, and this is similar across the entire industry, is customers are just so used by the next best solar company coming around the corner offering even 5% lower prices than the competition, that this is a downward spiral that eventually will lead to companies either building projects that are not profitable, or customers not signing up on projects anymore because they expect lower prices. But the reality of the market is that this year there will not be a downwards trend in terms of pricing. It will be upwards, and I think also 2023 it will be upwards. Still providing savings to customers, right, compared to the utility tariff, but much more difficult to achieve. And like Dan pointed out, if you have agreed upon prices but maybe not a final signature on the contract, then certainly you need to renegotiate. And that is not building up additional trust in the solar industry in general, right? So, yeah, I mean, we're very optimistic still, but with a few clouds blocking some sunshine on our forecast, I would say.
Thanks, Martin. Jeffrey, do you want to jump in on the inflation? I think particularly on the O&M front.
Yeah, so good comments there from Martin, which also is our perspective here. First of all, I think one of the things we've seen just in this situation is in 2021, most customers then opted not to capex the projects on their balance sheet, but then preferred to have a finance solution. So a lot of discussion, negotiations, renegotiations with customers in terms of how to finance the projects. And indeed, last year was quite a slow year here. So this year, it seems that the costs are still, equipment costs are still high. We haven't seen any reduction so far, and we don't see that also happening across the year. So we take a view that with our customers that if you're going to sit and wait for lower prices, you're going to be sitting and waiting for long. So best time to decide is now, and we're seeing most customers now opting for the finance solutions. So buying power and a PPA or lease arrangement is their preferred way, and they prefer to keep their money and use it for their own core business. So that's really what you're seeing. And in terms of O&M, of course, solar being a technology which there are hardly any replacements, so the highest cost is during construction and implementation. Beyond that, O&M is really 2 to 3% year on year. So it doesn't account so much for the cost of energy overall, but of course, that inflation factor, that escalation factor in PPA contracts is really being looked at now more keenly, because it is so unstable at the moment. So yeah, that's it. That's our experience.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I think one of the comments there about the race to the bottom and pricing is important in managing quality of installations, and the reputation of solar across the continent. So second, maybe you can just chat us through what you're seeing in Nigeria and how the Renewable Energy Association is also supporting clients in their procurement processes and ensuring quality is installed.
All right, thank you so much. So when we got into this, when I got into the solar space about 12, 13 years ago, it was a big issue because of challenge of low quality. There was so many projects that's been done that had not worked, so it was really very tough to sell solar. Also compounded by some of the government projects that were done on street lighting, and most of them were not functioning as at that time. So it was really a big challenge. So what we tried to do then, I remember in 2016 when the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria was formed, was to begin, an awareness creation, first lobbying government to through the Standard Organization of Nigeria, put some control measures in place, and ensuring that the right quality of products, gets into Nigerian market. I also know that the then Lights in Africa program, now very very sold, also helped a whole lot, because prior to then there were so many pico solar solutions that was also flooding the market. It was highly substandard. Okay, so the IFC and the World Bank putting together that program and beginning to create awareness in Nigeria also helped a bit. And then the association started engaging with the likes of the Ministry of Power, the Rural Electrification Agency, to try and engage on some measures to control the quality of the technology that comes to the Nigerian market. I can say today a lot of customers are much more aware of quality. Most time they ask for, what's your certification? Do you have an IEC for this product? Are you Lighting Global, for example, certified for Pico Solar? And then we also have an agency called the Nigerian Electricity Management Service Agency that also stepped in to control the quality of installations, particularly around the mini grids that were being rolled massively in Nigeria, to ensure that the right cables, the right components are used. Customers are beginning to demand for warranties, after sales service, and the RIAN as an association, we're also making an attempt to engage with. We have a consumer protection agency in Nigeria, where consumers can also call out installations and installers that have been below standard. So really, we've seen a whole lot of improvement. So customers are willing to pay a little bit higher for quality, knowing very well that it is in their own best interest to buy a good standard and not take on low quality products. So that's where we are. Although we're still seeing some influx of some solar products into the market in Nigeria, but it's getting a whole lot better.
Thanks, Segun. Buy cheap, buy twice is what they say. We had a raised hand from Lutz. If you want to ask a question, I'm just conscious that we're out of time. But Lutz, if you wanted to ask your question. Okay, silence. Okay. Then I think we've come to the end of our time. Thank you very much to all of the panelists for your contributions. Thank you to the audience for the questions that you posed. I hope it was informative for everybody that participated. I think Anand will share how you get access to recordings and things like this afterwards. And I think you can find all of the speakers on LinkedIn if you want to chat with them after the event. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all our esteemed panelists, for this wonderful session. And a very special thanks to Chanda ma'am for superbly managing the session. So the show is not over yet. We are taking a short networking break and we'll be back with another exciting session on the topic Tech Advancements, Constructing Profitable Projects, and Assessing Viability with Storage. Till then, explore our exhibition launch, network with your peers, and join our sponsors on the networking table. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome back, all the attendees. It's time now for our second session. I want to invite Mr. Titus, Technical Service Manager from Jinko Solar, for sponsor presentation. So you can share your screen.
Thank you so much, Anand, and also thank you, everyone. So as I share my screen, as mentioned, is that Peter Scratch, the technical service manager, and Africa. I think everyone can see my screen right now. Maybe Anand, you can confirm.
No, so we cannot see your screen.
So today is I'm going to make this presentation, and of course, and of course, and of course, set place for the next session. That is our second session for the day. And ideally, our main focus today is on energy storage solutions, and also how we get to integrate this with that is rooftop solar PV. And one before I start is that just to give some brief about Jinko Solar, and I know everyone else must be knowing right now is that Jinko has been a global PV module manufacturer and also supplier for the longest period of time since inception, that is 2006. And a few years back is that we've also now ventured also into increasing our portfolio to offering solutions that is PV plus solutions. And among these PV plus solutions is that we do have PV plus energy storage solutions, of which I would expand more today. Then we also have PV plus building, that is for essentially for BIPV. Then we also have PV plus pumping solutions as well, and also PV plus communications as well. So that is the whole compass of, or rather an overview of the solutions that we are offering for the market, not only for the African market, but for the all our markets. And to start off is that I will just give some brief highlights with regards to the state of renewables that is globally. And there usually some very good reports from the likes of IENA, the likes of PV Polling, showing on how what is the global impact of renewable energy that is in all the regions in the world. And what you can see is that from the report released last year, is that as of 2020, we're actually seeing that there's huge increase in uptake of renewable energy, and we were close to around 260 gigawatts of new renewable energy that was deployed. That is for 2020, and we can see that there is an upward trend that is in the uptake of renewable energy, and also a downward trend that is in the uptake of non-renewable energies. So that means that we are in the right track. But looking at like the case of one of the main contributors of this, that is this increase in uptake of renewable energy is also that is rooftop PV that is used for that is C&I applications. And with this increase is that there are also challenges that are coming up in that is the grid able to take up this that is sudden increase in renewable energies. We find that one of the main challenges with most of renewable energy sources like solar PV and also wind is the intermittent nature. So that means that we need something to be able to stabilize and make sure that it doesn't affect on the grid. And that's where now PV plus energy storage solutions comes in handy. And for those who've been ideally having so much of experience in Africa C&I sector, we find that yes, there is a lot of excitement about rooftop solar PV. But the question is rooftop solar PV really necessary with the Africa's unreliable grid? Because sometimes is that most of the clients, or rather the end users, might not understand that without the utility grid availability, so that means also the grid connected systems are not going to work. So that means that in this case is that we need something else to be of more of a transmission mechanism to be able to support that, and also be able to increase on the uptake of renewable energies, which includes solar PV and also wind. And in this case now is that we'll find that rooftop solar PV comes in handy, and we are going to look into that in the next few slides. The other thing is now why should we why should we focus on energy storage? And also we want to see that is there really a case for C&I rooftop solar PV for Africa? Is how is also energy storage supporting C&I rooftop solar PV? And essentially, in general, looking in general is that energy storage supports that is from the generation side, also on the grid side, that is looking into transmission and also distribution, and also on the end user side. From the generation side is that we are looking at how can we be able to that is increase the renewable energy fraction. Looking at currently is that most of the projects we are looking at between 15 to maybe that 5 or 40%. That's his renewable energy fraction, but we want to increase the fraction to maybe more than 60 or 70%. So that means that rooftop solar PV plays that very important role. The other thing is that on the grid side, which I'm not going to spend so much on today, is that there's also the provision of ancillary services like the likes of frequency regulation, voltage regulation, and also black spot capability as well. But what I want to really focus on is ideally on the user side, of which that is our main topic of today, when we are talking about rooftop solar PV, that is rooftop solar PV. And we find that there are so many useful case applications for energy storage. One of the cases that we are going to look at is for the case of peak shaving. We're also going to look at peak shifting as well, and also we're going to look at backup, and also for the case of microgrids, in the case that the C&I, that is the C&I customers want to go to the islanding mode. Then as a manufacturer is why we got into why we actually got into offering solutions for PV plus energy storage is because of a number of factors that we are looking at. Because we want to ideally position ourselves as a brand, not only offering products but also offering solutions. One of the key things that is known about Jinko Solar is quality. And the reason why is that we focus on quality is it's one of the key differentiators between different manufacturers. And one is that how we ensure quality is that we first look at our supply chain. How do we qualify our suppliers? How do we qualify our bill of materials? Then the other thing is that we also look at the range of certifications based on looking at internal certifications and also partnership with most certification institutions as well. And the other thing is why we also find that we position ourselves is that we also position ourselves by having very strong bargaining power, that is in the upstream supply market, that is getting raw materials from upstream suppliers. And also we also regards to acting as intermediary between different us being a manufacturer and also different players in that is in the solar industry as well. And most of the part, because to be honest, is that for the energy storage solutions is that we are not manufacturing all the components. So that means that some of the components we have to play the integrator role. And playing the integrator role and also having in the aspect of quality. So that means that we must all that to be able to produce reliable solutions. And for the solution that we're going to discuss is that we're offering different solutions, and not only standard solutions, because different customers, or rather you as different customers, will have different needs and also application scenarios. So we provide our standard solutions and also customized solutions as well. And then lastly is the main objective that we strive to achieve is the lowest cost of energy. And to achieve the lowest cost of energy is that we need to combine a number of scenarios. That is one, like increasing, that is having the most efficient systems, also looking at the warranties as well, also looking at the quality of the equipment that we're also deploying, and also not forgetting also the initial cost. So we try to have the balance. And we try to have all the balance to be able to assist also our customers to be able to achieve the lowest cost of energy. And now is then briefly I want to look into now the Jinko energy storage solutions and also on the different C&I applications. And one, I would like to of course ask to understand on what solutions are we providing for the C&I sector. And as I said, is that these are energy storage solutions. The solutions are based on the lithium iron phosphate technologies. And of course, we have solutions all the way from 1 kilowatt hour to megawatt hour, that is to hundreds of megawatt hours. But for the C&I scale is that we are looking at solutions between 50 kilowatt hour to actually close to 2.2 megawatt hours. That is on our standard product list. And these solutions is that we actually try to see that we do the integration that is in our factory, and not only the integration, also the testing to ensure that we can be able to we don't foresee any challenges that are going to happen. We actually make sure that there are no defects, and of course to make sure that in case of warranty issues, be able to also be able to follow up and get to know exactly, because we are playing more of the integrator role. And the solutions, as you can see in this case, is that solutions all the way from 30 kilowatts for the power conversion system, or rather the hybrid inverter, all the way to 2.2 megawatt hours, 2.2 megawatt hours. And you can see is that these solutions are packaged in such a way that we have them in cabinets, that is in either cabinets for the smaller solutions, smaller cabinets, medium-sized cabinets, smaller size containers, and also 20 and 40-foot containers as well, depending on the size of the system. And the other thing is that for other solutions as well is that we can actually have up to 2.7 megawatt hours in one 20-foot container. That is only for the battery and having the power conversion system and the other ancillary equipment in a separate in a separate compartment or other container. And for the solutions, as I said, that these are customized solutions, so it can either be also DC or AC coupled. And on the left-hand side is that you can actually see that these are some of the systems that are already deployed. You can see these in a 4-foot container. We also have other solutions in 10-foot containers, and also a number of solutions, as I will show you in our reference projects. Then now is that are we supporting, are we as a manufacturer, or rather as a manufacturer and also as a systems integrator, are we supporting the C&I sector and also the rooftop PV in the African market? So as I said is that we try to make sure that we provide that is customized solutions and also good quality solutions for the market. And also we try to also make sure that we achieve the lowest cost of energy. And one of the key indicators that we try to lessen, that is one, the installation time, and also the operation and maintenance time. Because most of the equipment is that we find that all these equipment are actually integrated in our factory in China. And you can see from this case is that all the way from the STS, we have the base controller, we have the solution transformer, we have the PCS, we also have the DC-DC converter for the case of DC coupled system, and also we have the battery jacks as well. So you can see that with regards to the end user, what only remains is the connections that is on the connections on the DC side and also the connections on the AC side. But for the internal connections, that is all taken care of. And also for this is that we also find that we also supporting with regards to there is the fire separation system to ensure that there's maximum system safety. Then also the HVAC equipment as well to ensure also for the optimal operation of the whole unit. And the other thing is that we've made these solutions in such a way that they are modular, in that you can easily expand. That is from small kilowatt systems, to megawatt systems as well. And looking at also how we also try to support is that we also giving provisions for that is automatic transfer switches and also static transfer switches for the case where you want to have your operations in either off grid and also the on grid mode as well. And now is that for the different application scenarios is that we look at one that is for the energy safety, that is of your PV generation. And I'll say basically is that in most of the projects that is in the C&I sector and where we have the rooftop solar PV, is that PV generation usually occurs during the day, and the peak is around between, let's say, 12 p.m. to around 3 p.m. And you'll find that it's not necessarily that the load, or rather the peak load, will be at that point. You'll find also some of the production facilities or commercial facilities having their peak loads not necessarily in the noon or towards the noon, but rather in the evening. So in the case of this area, that to avoid the waste of the generation is that we're using this peak production during the day to charge the batteries, our batteries. Then during that is later on during the evening or early in the morning is that we use that generation to be able to power the load. And in the end is that we get also to reduce on the need of power, how much power is required from the grid. And essentially is that we're reducing on the total cost because we are reducing on the ideally the grid purchases. And that thing as well is that we're also looking at peak, and also that is let me say peak shaving in general. And essentially is that, as discussed in the past session, is that most counties or rather utilities in Africa actually employ the time of use, that is the time of use pricing. And you'll find that the pricing that is at off-peak hours usually lower, and also the price of that is electricity at a peak period usually higher. So in this case is that in this case is that we can actually use that is the solar PV, that is no sorry the energy storage solutions to be able to charge during the off-peak period and be able to use that that is at the peak period. And in this case is that we also get to reduce the purchase from grid. So that is one, that is for the peak shaving. The other thing is in some of in some of the utilities as well, there is utility grids is that the demand charges are quite higher. I think for the cases of the likes of South Africa, the likes of Botswana, the demand charge is usually higher. That is stipulated by the regulation. So essentially is that for this also for the energy storage solutions is that with the peak shaving application we get also to make sure that we able to reduce the peak purchase from the grid as well, and be able to reduce huge costs in terms of how much you pay to the utility grid. Then then lastly is we've also done not only simulations but also that is calculations in different scenarios to see and does it really make sense to have energy storage? Currently is that yes, the cost of battery or other energy storage solutions is still higher, but in comparison now, there is the overall cost of energy, that is the LCO. Looking at only using grid generation, you'll find that the cost per kilowatt hour is something between around 8 cents to around 17 cents. 8 cents to 17 cents. That is average for most of the regions in sub-Saharan Africa. Then we'll also see that but the main problem with using grid is that there's also the initial cost, the initial cost regards to access of electricity. You'll find most of the C&I facilities actually in rural areas, and getting access to this is a bit of a challenge. And also there's also the other aspect of also reliability of the grid. The other thing is also for diesel generation, is that most of the customers, especially in West Africa, would prefer to use diesel gensets. But you find that yes, for diesel generation is that it might look to be reliable, but you can, or rather the initial capex, the initial cost is a bit lower, but you can see that the cost, that the overall cost, the overall cost of the whole system is actually the overall cost of energy is way higher compared to even using only the utility grid. That is from 0.6 from 61 cents to around 87 cents per kilowatt hour. Whereas looking at energy storage, this was based on now on energy storage solutions. That is our own pricing, our own warranties, and also our own durability. That is based on our calculation. We're estimating that that is between 13 cents to around 17 cents. And the other advantage as well that also comes in is that we are using clean energy that is also reliable, and also in the whole essence, it's also cheaper compared to using diesel generation, and also in some other regions that is also on grid as well. Then just some few case studies is that we have so many case studies. We deployed so many projects for the past few years, and just to mention a few, that is in Nigeria and also in Malawi. But I would say that if you want us to support, if you want us to support you in any of your projects, that is with regards to design and also equipment, that is equipment specification as well, or any other thing that you can also support, you can get to reach to us. So that is my email address. You can get to me at any given time. So thank you so much, and back to you, Anand.
Thank you, sir, for this insightful presentation. So now it's time for our much awaited panel discussion for the session on tech advancement, constructing profitable projects, and assessing viability with storage. In the esteemed panel, we have Mr. Alan Okello, Director, Village Power and Board Member, Uganda Solar Energy Association, who is also the moderator for this session. Mr. Henry Ejinwa, Sales Manager, West and Central Africa, JA Solar. Mr. Norman Moyo, CEO, Distributed Power Africa. Mr. Troy Barry, CTO, Aria Finery Holdings Limited. Mr. Avesh, founder and CEO, Fibon Energy, Mr. Gabriel Croix, Head of Engineering, Empower Private Limited. Welcoming all the panelists on the screen and handing it over to Alan, sir.
Thank you. I always forget to unmute, but testing. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear.
Great. Thank you all for joining this afternoon. I'm really excited about the technology advancements, and I hope that people here can surprise us with something new. But let's get started. So just to kick this off, one of the first questions that a lot of people would like to know is how do you deal with making sure that your procurement practices are adopted to make sure that the project can live as long as it can, so the longevity of the rooftop solar is assured for the customer? So maybe we can start with Henry, if you can give us something about that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so coming from a manufacturer's point of view, our basic focus is to see that we meet international standards. So what it basically means is for every of our production, we make sure that there are international agencies who are actually certifying that the modules that you're producing can actually outlive or live within the time frame that you're actually proposing. So basically, we are saying for solar projects, we are talking about 25 years lifespan. So basically, it's not just about saying these solar modules will last 25 years. We need third-party certifying agencies who would come in and say these solar modules can actually go 25 years. And not just 25 years, they can give you their maximum output power within that same time frame. Yeah, we understand degradation across the number of years, which is quite acceptable. But we need to make sure that at the end of the 25 years, you are guaranteed that your power production would remain what it should be based on when you initially initiated the project.
Okay, and how do you make sure that you don't increase so much the end user price as well as you do that?
So one of basically the PV industry is in a continuous process of trying to lower the levelized cost of electricity. That's our major focus, because we're trying to provide electricity at its so to say cheapest point. So one of such things we try to do is we try to improve our technology in terms of manufacturing solar panels. And one of such is that we try to improve the cell efficiency. So at about 3-4 years ago, we can realize that the cell efficiency was about 17 to 18%, but now it stands at about 21%, if I'm not mistaken. That is one aspect. Another aspect is also trying to improve how much power you can get from just one solar module. So if anyone can check back 3 years ago, we had maybe the maximum solar panel at about 250, 270 watt peak. But now in the market, we have about 500, 550, even going up to 600 watt peak, which is almost 100% increase. But then that increase is not just an increase in just the power. Yes, there's a very minute increase in the square area. So basically, you have about 100% power increase, and then about less than 50% square area increase. So basically, for a specific square area, you're able to install more PV, generate more power at the same time, which, whether you like it or not, it definitely reduces your overall installation cost, and then at the end of the day, your levelized cost of electricity.
Okay, and that's over time, I assume, as well.
Obviously.
Yeah. And so I want to bring Tori in. So with respect to battery storage, I wanted you to sort of touch on the new advancement in storage with rooftop solar and inverters as well. And how do these advancements keep these sort of projects more viable for commercial and industrial customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the intro. My name is Troy Berry, CTO with the REF Energy. We work out of Nairobi. We have a small financing arm, but are also an engineering procurement design company. 35 projects in Kenya and Uganda, and a team of 25 with maintenance. So we're really happy to be on this conference with everyone. Thanks for the question, Alan. Yeah, I mean, there's been I really like what I'm seeing from Jinko, and in the previous presentation, you know, JA also went over some of the details around more power, more efficiency. There's also optimizers you can put on roofs that have a little bit of shading. Concerns around inverters, we really like to see you know, more and more MPPTs. That gives us lots of flexibility for orientation, for different shading, but it also having only 2 strings per MPPT allows you to not include fuses. So there's a little bit of efficiencies there and just removing components, but still saving safe. With only 2 strings, you can only have that one other strings, even if a short circuit happens. So that design has reduced the number of components that is needed. Batteries is pretty interesting, and you know, I'm kind of paying attention to the conversation within this Congress. And utility, it makes a lot of sense, right? Utilities aren't doing it, but it would make a lot of sense for them. I think a lot of the distribution problems that they have would be solved by storage. In Kenya, we have a surplus of power for 22 hours of the day, and we have a deficit for 2 hours of the day. That's exactly what storage is included for. There's also power, voltage, frequency stabilization. This is being done quite a bit in Europe, where there's distributed storage along the transmission lines, along the distribution lines. Putting those devices out there with proper power converters and electronics can actually improve voltage and frequency fluctuations. And that's what we really hear from a lot of our clients, is especially the rural ones, is they're suffering from you know, massive voltage variations throughout the day. And this is something that distributed storage can solve. The off-grid and residential, I think specifically for off-grid storage is quite obvious. Really need to see Jinko supplying the information there on their hybrid inverters. It's actually in my notes. Hybrid inverters to me is the way to go for off-grid. You can have a battery port and a solar port, and you have one device that controls the whole microgrid or camp, if it's a case in an off-grid, or even a house. I like having the multiple sources because you're only talking to one thing. A lot of previous projects used to have, you know, you'd string 20 inverters together, and the ability to get them all to sync and to form a grid just led to massive troubleshooting issues. But with a single hybrid inverter, that is drastically reduced. So I really like that. And also having multiple sizes, an EPC such as us can get very used to working with the manufacturer. And if we need a 30 kilowatt, if we need a 500 kilowatt, we can go to the same place. So for all the manufacturers there, you know, having multiple sizes, good flexible choice for EPCs, that's quite useful. Then kind of the meat of this, CNI. So how do we make it profitable? Because we've talked about energy arbitrage. There's a good review. We talked about peak demand. We talked about solar capture and moving it into the valleys and the peaks. I haven't seen too many policies that actually incentivize that. You know, even the last discussion, people said it's not quite there yet for the battery prices. You would need a controller that does all three, and that controller sometimes, you know, for a battery, you have to decide between, do I keep all of this battery for backup purposes, or do I use it all to reduce my grid charges? And how do I use it based on all the different policies that are there? So some really interesting things. I think it comes down to controllers. AREA, we are looking at that and developing that. We do have an R&D team. I would say check back in Africa Rooftop Congress 2023. But we're really looking at ways to get batteries in for CNI, and the higher offering from manufacturers is a great help, because I think up until maybe the last year, that was what was missing, was those types of available options. It's really good to see those available now.
Okay, understood. Great. I would like to bring in your colleague Simon on this now, to just sort of touch on, you know, as we keep, you know, developing better and more energy efficient equipment to use in these projects, how will ensuring the longevity of these solar rooftops equipment does not compromise the quality of light specifically, But then also, how do we make sure that, I know that the price of solar panels sort of is diminishing over time, same with battery storage as it gets efficient. But how do we make sure that we keep the tariff sort of low, especially with respect to issues like the last year that we've had, where costs for importing a lot of these things increases. And I mean, I don't know about your company, but most companies do pass that cost on to the end user. And so I think, Simon, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks, Akelo. I think a bit about my experience over, the years I've been in the industry. I've been around for about 8 years. And if I think about where we started and where we are now, at the beginning, it used to be very much the case that you could pick the highest quality, highest cost components and put those out, and you didn't really have to think twice because the margins were there to support that. But what I think what's happening now with the downward pressure on the pricing, and you mentioned the tariffs and the component prices, and I think I'd want to add into that, the downward pressure from on your margins, from the competition, because I think in all markets, the competition is just getting bigger and bigger and more fierce, and so your margins are having to come down. And I think what that's doing now is it's putting a lot of pressure onto the designers, the installers, and the maintenance crew to make sure that what the work that they're doing is really supporting the longevity of the project. A sort of quick example I can think of is when I started, it was standard practice that your DC to AC ratio was 1. You'd put in the same number of rating of the modules as you do the inverters. And over time, obviously, that's now, you can't do that anymore. You've really pushed that ratio, and you've got to be smart about how, when do you go 1.1, when you go 1.2, can you go 1.4? Can you really push that ratio to the point where, components fail, or just before they fail? Before it was standard, you just did 6 square millimeter cable, but when can you use 4 square millimeter? So the designers are having to really be smart about how they pick the components. Another example, when I started, it was just standard. You just went with the German products. That was it. You picked German modules, German inverters, German structures. That was it. You didn't even have to think about it. But now there's so many different products on the market, and you need to have the understanding to be able to say, well, can I use this particular product? It's cheaper. Is it suitable for my application? Then following next on it is the installers. There's a lot of pressure on installers to make sure that they're doing the right installation, high quality, good workmanship, making sure they're installing according to the requirements of the manufacturers. I think if we look at the downtime that we see on our projects, majority of the time it's due to installation errors. It's not due to equipment failures or problems, lightning or anything like that. We're seeing installation errors, loose connections, things installed incorrectly. So good quality installation work ensures the longevity. Making sure the cabling is done correctly, modules installed correctly, inverters are done, all of that. And then I think what's really critical is the maintenance. After the commissioning, making sure that you're monitoring the plant, you're checking the performance, you are repairing things quickly, troubleshooting, because the best components and the best installation is useless if after one fault the project is down for a month. And you see that in the market. You speak to customers and they say, I've got no one looking at my plant and it's been down for 3 months and we don't know, no one can look at it. So really being on it with the maintenance, monitoring it, daily, checking your performance ratios, responding quickly when you see a fault, making sure the manufacturers are available, immediately when you've got an issue that you can't solve, and providing good service to the clients, replacing things as needed. So yeah, I think it's pushed the pressure, onto the developers, onto the installers and maintenance teams to really make sure that their work ensures the longevity. You don't just rely on the components, that have just all this extra buffer, and that gives you the longevity.
Okay, understood. Great. Yeah, and I'd like to bring Norman in on this now, because yes, longevity is key, but I come from a company where we, at the start, tried to do everything ourselves, from designing, manufacturing, importing, distributing, and selling. And so I wanted to know from your end, are there any specific partnerships that you guys have been able to make that have meant that you keep getting the most advanced models manufactured for you? And how are these advancements that you can get from these sort of partnerships leading to longer rooftop solar PV for yourself?
Yes, Okelo, thank you. For DPA, we tend to work with what we classify tier one partners, and that is anything from, well, the Bloomberg rated tier one partners. So obviously, the likes of Jingo are in that space, both for the PV and also for the storage. I think our offering is primarily to deliver energy as a service to a tier one corporate in the continent. We tend to speak and engage the top 500 corporates in Africa, and we would like to invest in their facilities. We would like to deploy the best technology possible, and we would like to be able to finance these and operate and manage for the next however long, 20 years, that the customer needs the power. I think a major conversation for us is, I think in the PV space, the space has continued to grow very nicely. The pricing is coming right. If you were to take out the blip from COVID, which we hope will be a thing of the past soon, we've seen a very nice trajectory from a PV perspective, both even in the quality of the panels and the quality of the pricing. We're happy. Now, the unfortunate thing is the continent is reeling under an acute energy crisis, characterized firstly by, I'm in South Africa right now, and in the morning they did warn us that you will start having some load shedding. And we know most countries in sub-Saharan Africa are beginning to race in that direction. It's like misery loves company. So we're all moving in that direction, which means my PV alone, which is to the earlier presentation, is becomes a white elephant if the grid disappears on me. And any system that you build out there that does not come with some sort of reference is almost destined to fail. And the only reference that we then have, which we have built the capabilities, generator itself. So we're beginning to actually support this system by integrating it to a generator, but it's not an optimal system. Given a choice, I would love to see the Jinko story of a 13 cents to 17 cents storage solution. And then I'm beginning to proffer a real viable and sustainable proposition to my customers. So those are some of the challenges we face. And we obviously like the fact that we're seeing the players, the Jinkos of this world, beginning to become more active in even supporting us with the design, conceptualization, and some of the modeling behind it. So in summary, we've got a challenge. The PV, we are worried about the pricing, but we hope that will improve. But storage is actually a nightmare because we don't see a drop in the price, but availability is probably even a bigger problem. The actual levelized cost of energy is less of a headache because there is now a blackout. When there's a blackout, the conversation ceases to become a price conversation. It's a security conversation.
That is true. All right. I'd like to bring in Avesh on this because we've reached a stage where, okay, yes, we've designed our solar PV to run for 25, 30 years. But look at the environment we're running in with global warming and these sort of effects. A sort of similar question that I had for Norman. How are the advancements in module manufacturing going to affect your PV design for projects that need to be around 30 years from now when, for example, the resting temperature for operation is very different from what you had designed?
Good afternoon, everyone, and to the delegates as well. Thank you. Avesh Pediatri, the CEO of Viability Energy. I think I'm going to defer that question to some of the other OEMs that are on the call on the panel here. But what I can do is perhaps answer that question from a different perspective. So the question the answer that I'd have is how do we see the role of developers and EPCs change over time during the lifespan of these projects? Okay, and I think that if I look at this in terms of possibly the last 5 years, when we're looking at rooftop solar, what we've seen is changes, certainly in terms of the technology, in terms of the designs, and that's been mentioned, I think, in the panel, and we're quite aware of that. But the shift as a developer, talking where I'm coming from, is that we're seeing a movement from viewing solar as a product to energy as a service. And the reason that's important is that we essentially see the importance of optimization of existing solar plants and the continuous monitoring and reporting of that becoming critical in the revenue streams for developers. So I think that's the one aspect which I've seen as changing. The second is, it's been addressed and touched on slightly, is that Norman mentioned about the fact that what happens when the grid is not stable or is not producing power. So what we see as a developer is how are the pure play solutions in terms of solar going to address broader pain points. So yes, we're discussing rooftop solar PV, but interestingly enough is, and I found that the Jinko presentation really quite exciting, and some of the OEMs have been threatening to bring this to market for quite a while now. But from our perspective, what that enables, it enables developers to address broader pain points. So we're certainly seeing this in terms of how does the technology that we've installed 5, 7, 8 years ago now integrate with other complementary solutions, in the case of battery storage, in the case of gas, continuous gas to power solutions. And what I think is important is how efficient is that integration with installations that may have occurred 5 or 8 years ago, given changes in technology that we're seeing. So that's certainly something that we are facing on a daily basis. I'll give you an example. We have solar systems which we installed probably just over 9 to 10 years ago. And the real question that we're facing in South Africa now is how do we integrate that with battery energy storage solutions? And the questions asked by many of the clients, and these are tier 1 corporate listed clients, is will the solar rooftop system that was installed in 2012 integrate with some of this newer technology that we're seeing in terms of battery storage? And I think the simple answer is that this certainly is possible, and that is a trend that we're seeing, and something that's becoming very important in terms of how technology is moving. So I've answered that question of yours, Akelo, in a bit of a roundabout fashion, but it's really from our perspective as to how we see these changes in technology. Just one thing that I'd like to mention here is that one of the things I've seen over the last 5 to 8 years is the theme that we've seen is that of globalization. So procurement of hardware on a global market basis, and that's been irrespective of where these projects are located. I think what has been important is the pandemic has prodded many companies to reconsider their supply chain in light of bottlenecks and increases in shipping and logistic costs. And what we're seeing now is, interestingly enough, is companies reconsidering localization, reconsidering local assembly of hardware. And so in terms of the question you asked around technology and improvements, we're seeing that OEMs are now open to collaborating in country across the continent, and certainly in South Africa, on a greater basis than we possibly had seen in the past. So I hope that answers, in some respects, some of the thought processes that you're looking at.
Yeah, it does, and it actually raises a few more questions, and maybe I apologize ahead of time to Gabriel, who I'm going to bring in now, because you got me thinking. So I know the pandemic and all these changes over with the technology have been sort of efficiency and product focused. But are there any aspects of design and selection of your modules that have been pushed by changing user behavior? For example, if you designed, if there's a case study that you have of a PV project that you designed for a specific load, but due to the pandemic and the increased need for households or corporates or factories to increase their demand that was different from what you designed. Are there any case studies like that that made you have to, re-envision what your original plan was with your, yeah.
Yeah,
Does that
absolutely.
make
Thanks.
sense?
I'm Gabriel Cruz, Head of Engineering at Empower, and we're in EPC based in Cape Town, South Africa. And I definitely think the pandemic had a massive impact on specific supply chains. If you think mid last year, there was a glass shortage in China, which had a massive impact on the PV module prices. And it was partially due to the fact that some of the factories that manufactured or produced the glass had to shut down because of pandemics, and some of the mines couldn't mine some of the raw materials and so on. So we would have to source modules elsewhere. We've also seen shipping companies needing to reroute because borders were closed and we couldn't get hardware imported. So there was a big drive to procure locally as much as possible, which has a positive impact on the local economy. But the question at the end of the day is who's paying for that? If the local products come at lower quality specs or lower efficiencies, then you're producing a system or engineering a system with a lower output. Or if it comes at a higher price because the local labor force, for example, may be more expensive, then are you passing those costs on to the end client? And actually touches on another topic that I thought would be interesting is when you talk about who carries the cost or who carries the price, the big question that we need to ask is actually who carries the risk, and is the end user willing to pay to de-risk this? And that goes even further upstream in the design process to talk about are we designing for CapEx or LCOE? And Africa as a continent is very CapEx sensitive. We because of just general poverty and sort of low CapEx availability, there's the drive to the bottom to basically just get the lowest module prices or the lowest project prices out there. But it doesn't mean that the project will be reliable and sustainable over a 15, 20, 25-year period. So the lowest LCOE may well be a more capex intensive project with reduced maintenance and a more sustainable product that has a guarantee behind it. And that then touches on, is the client asking for a guarantee when they're buying it? Are they buying it through a PPA? Is there financing behind it? Is it bank financed or IPP financed? And all of that talks to, who's willing to take the risk. And in the risk, there's a certain amount of basically just money built in there to say that, if you want to pass the risk to somebody else, then you need to pay that extra. Whereas, if you take the risk on yourself, then you can do it for cheaper. Something else I wanted to touch on that Troy mentioned earlier and was regarding the hybrids, and it also touches on Avesh's comment on is the projects of 2012 integratable with the newer projects. And one of the challenges that we've seen in the industry is, we found it hard to find good quality, reliable, big hybrid inverters, because mostly hybrid inverters used to be smaller, focused for residential or small off-grid systems. I'm talking 5 or 10 kilowatts. And it wasn't up until very recently where big players came along and developed, a 200 and a 500 kilowatt sort of hybrid inverter. Those weren't in the market 5 years ago, and it made it hard to provide hybrid solutions to the CNI market. But I also agree with the fact that hybrid inverters, eliminate the need for integration of different parts. And the more links you have between different components, the higher the likelihood of failure, whether it's communication or integration. And that's ultimately going to be the challenge, when you integrate new battery technologies with old PV systems. If the old PV system, they're unlikely to have, battery capacity, so they will take the solar's inverter, as an AC input into the overall PCS then, and there will definitely need to be some integration done there that will make this old PV system backwards compatible and enable it to communicate with whatever new inverter you put in place to enable the batteries and all of those into this system. So
great, thank you for that. I just wanted to also just bring in, sorry, I'm still remembering the name, to bring Henry in on this. Do you have any feedback on this as well, or do you feel pretty much the same as Gabriel is, or do you see a different side of this, especially since you are working within a different region? So are there any insights there as well regarding this?
So I would like to come from this angle. JA as a solar module manufacturing, it would make no sense if you're trying to improve your technology without having to carry along every other OEM, like the inverter manufacturer, the battery manufacturer, and all of that. Because it would make no sense if you're improving your technology and they're not quite compatible with the inverter or the batteries as well. So there has to be some level of collaboration. And one of such thing we are doing is we have a very close partnership with battery manufacturers like LG, Ampere's Technology, BYD, and a couple of other top tier battery manufacturers. So what that does for us is for every technology we about to come up with or to deploy into the market, we make sure they are quite compatible with every of their own products, both from the inverter perspective and also from the battery perspective, because at the end of the day, the person who bears the brunt of this is either the project developer or all the end user at the end of the day. Because if I've improved my PV and the battery, so to say, cannot, the battery or the inverter cannot, so to say, accommodate the improvements I've made in my PV, it's so to say useless. But that doesn't defy the fact that JA as a solar module manufacturer has made considerable improvements in its technology and module manufacturing. So we make sure we carry along every other OEMs. So at the moment, yes, there are a couple of feedbacks from end users who are basically saying, okay, these are our current equipment, and how do they integrate to the current technologies that you're putting out. One of such is a customer could ask, I have a 250 watt solar panel. Can I integrate that with a current 540 watts solar panel? It just takes to explain to them and understand that there are certain factors you have to weigh in. Okay, for the 250 watt, what's the open circuit voltage? What's the short circuit current? And then you have to compare that with the 550 watt as well. So there has to be comparison for you to know that, okay, this wouldn't really match with this, but then there are components you can bring in between to obviously make them work together.
Okay, understood. Great. And one component I really wanted to hear a bit more about that's not heavily touched on in this discussion was around the cooling. And so I'd like to hear from maybe Troy on this, if you've had any issues with upgrading or integrating newer cooling options at all.
So, sorry, Alan, cooling for what? The components, or?
Yeah, for just in general, any cooling advancements. I mean, if you want me to be specific, I can be. How technical can we get here? So I would say maybe let's start with maybe the battery cooling, for example. Are there any advancements you're seeing with specific to battery cooling that you see can make these projects a lot more viable and cost effective. That's one. And then two, let's start with that, and then we can take it from there.
Okay. I'm actually in Kenya. I call this a cold country, even though we're at the equator. But everything in Kenya is at elevation, so we don't have to deal with temperature for any of our projects. It goes from 20, and everybody wears mittens and caps, and it goes up to 32, and everybody complains about the heat. But just some information on the subject. What I do really like is the containerized battery systems. They come with their own HVAC. They come with their own controls. That makes it a lot easier for an EPC just to take something basically from the port and drop it in at a customer site. And you're just plugging in the electrical cables, and everything else can run by itself. I mean, that's just a very simple solution for an EPC. I used to work in flow battery design, and these flow batteries, I mean, lots of promises, but also lots of complexity. They definitely, if it gets above 37 temperature degrees within the container, things started to shut down and got heavy derated. And so we were looking at reflective paint. We were looking at passive cooling because our efficiency wasn't very good. We looked at a lot of ways of, okay, can we put in a solar panel on the roof of this thing just to put more shade? We are doing a battery project at the coast. That one also with salt air. We're looking at, we have to put in a container around it, an enclosure, and just make sure that there's a dehumidifier just to make things less corrosive. And then panels, lastly, one of the benefits of having someone like Simon on our team with a lot of technical experience, that distance between the panel to the roof for these Mabati metal roofing sheets, that's a big difference for a lot of heat. You need a lot of airflow. These again, LCOE. I posted a question in the chat. LCOE is big for someone who owns the project, and again, as Gabriel said, when you're sitting there, when the company's sitting there looking at two proposals, it's hard to say, well, hey, ours we have good offset from the roof, and you're going to get a lot more energy out of our project than someone else's. So if it's a PPA, if we own it, we can make all those decisions freely ourselves. You still at the end, someone has to pay for that capex. And, it's all worked in there.
Understood. Okay. So I just want everyone to just wrap up. So I'll give everyone 1 minute. Your final thoughts. I would also like to make sure that you give your final thoughts on the key takeaways for profitability of these projects, especially. So maybe Troy, you can start, and then Simon, then we can move from there. Just 1 minute each.
Great. Yeah. I think just one thing I really take from this is, a lot of Moyo's points around, what happens when the grid goes down. We're really looking at power stabilization a lot. The total cost of energy from a system that allows the client to continue to operate through power failures, not having to be disturbed, and not having product losses, motor maintenance wear with all the voltage fluctuations. We're really looking at power stabilization. Once you have batteries in there for power stabilization, then I think you can do some of those money-making arbitrage and peak shaving ideas that is also talked about. I don't think they pay for batteries on their own, but if the batteries are there for the backup, then they start to pay for themselves. So that's really exciting. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think everything around the pandemic, the biggest changes I've seen is more of an interest in solar. People are trying to reduce their operating costs. I think revenues went down, operating costs stayed the same, and everybody finally was pushed over the edge to all of these proposals we've been sending out for 10 years, saying, hey, you guys should do this now. There's been a lot of uptake, which is good. We get utilities on board with improving the power. Everybody does what they can. Companies start being interested. We do good workmanship practices so these systems work, and more and more people will be convinced that they should go solar. They should go solar plus storage.
Awesome.
So thanks for the time, everyone.
No worries. Simon, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks to everyone for the comments. I think it's been a really insightful session. I think my big takeaways, listening to Titus, listening to Avesh, talking about integrating different types of technology, into and different should we say generations of technology, because your project, if it must last the 10, 15, 20 years, you want to be able to keep some bits, toss some things out. It was also mentioned, I think you mentioned, environmental conditions can change, technology improves, the client's requirements change. So really that ability to take different pieces of different technology of different ages and different generations and piece them together, to make something that meets all the client's needs. And I think, we sometimes say at AREA, the PV is a little bit of a gateway. That's what gets them in the door. But then there's all these other bits that you can add on to that. Whether it's storage, whether it's stabilization and voltage regulation and all those sorts of things. So taking all these different things, putting them together, and integrating it. I think the integrating becomes a bigger and bigger part of this. You're not just a rooftop grid type PV installer. You take things, throw it on the roof, and you switch it on. You've really got to be able to take all these bits and look at what the client needs. We say we like to knock out the client's power pain points. Everything that's the issue with power. What can we tackle? And I think we're seeing now the different technologies can hit all of those.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much for that, Simon. Nathan, take it away, sir. Sorry, Norman, not Nathan.
I wanted to just let you intro it, Okelo. I don't mind all sorts of names, yeah. So energy, Okelo, remains, I think, has become a perfect storm for the continent to solve one of its biggest infrastructure challenges. And all we are seeing across the board is a major crisis, and you never waste away a crisis. So to the tech players in the room, we are asking to say, let's not also, there's something called intellectual plagiarism, copying from the best. So don't build an inverter that cannot talk to the other systems. Build an inverter that talks to all other systems, because we have been there with ATMs in Africa. We have been there with cars in Africa. The batteries need to be able to have some interoperability that works well. For me, from a profit point of view, I think the renewable energy, the combination of solar and PV continues to be a major opportunity for the continent and for the clients, both to improve their energy security, energy costs, and even profitability of their businesses. We can't continue to burn generators and even hope to become profitable. So I think that's the challenge out there. We are in the middle of a storm. Let's make the best out of the crisis.
Understood. Thank you, Norman. Indeed, stress the business model, not the IP. All right, let's have Avesh go next.
Thank you, Kela. I think that from the discussions that we've had, one of the important aspects around profitability is understanding the greater pain points of consumers, of stakeholders, whether they be regulators, and many businesses or companies that are adopting these energy solutions. And the broader pain points will evolve over time and certainly can change. So what we saw initially was with solar rooftop projects was one of reducing operating costs. And as we see now with the discussions around interoperability of technologies, these pain points have now moved to or merged into aspects around emergency power, intermittent power, what we use as a term in South Africa. Norman is familiar with it, sitting there now, is load shedding. We had it earlier today at 2 o'clock before we got into this call. So these are challenges that many consumers are facing across the continent in different forms and under different names and guises. But these challenges really present opportunities. They present opportunities in terms of how we cost, design, and execute our solar projects, and more broadly, our energy projects as developers, as EPCs, and as OEMs. And the last theme I'll talk about is that of collaboration. Collaboration amongst our OEM manufacturers, developers, and EPCs. We've seen this, and I've seen this personally, that when I started in this industry 10 to 12 years ago, many of the companies were operating as independents. You had a solar company, you had an installer company that operated independently. You had a design or engineering consulting company that operated independently. And then you had finance and investment houses, whether they've played across the capital stack in terms of debt, equity, or MES. And what we're seeing in the broader industry is that of vertical integration. And we're seeing installers that have now become EPCs. We're seeing EPCs that have now are operating as investment houses. And the collaboration that I see in terms of the next step is really around with OEMs. So where we can see OEMs being investing alongside, not just financially, but in terms of the technology, in terms of the appetite to explore projects across the continent. That is where we're going to see reduction in costs, alignment of interests in terms of the returns to both producers or manufacturers of hardware and the projects that we are ultimately looking to get off the ground. So thank you very much for the Congress today, and I look forward to 2023 when we can benchmark how far the OEMs have come to support the developers and how far the developers are supporting the EPCs, and more importantly, where Jinko is with the hybrid inverters, because we're very keen to Titus to bring those into some of our projects here in South Africa and across sub-Saharan Africa. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Aveshtu. Gabriel, take it away, sir.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I think getting back to the sort of key question of this session, technology advancements, and how it impacted the profitability, of solar and storage. And to answer that, or in a closing remark on that, would be, my comments to clients are always that solar and storage, answer two different questions. Solar is primarily a cost-saving and an energy or power generation solution where storage or batteries solve a power reliability and availability problem. So the technologies have advanced in both of those, and both the advancements in those two fields have allowed us to build these projects more cost effectively. I mean, Henry talked about the modules and how it impacted the overall balance of plant costs, where we now, for a 50 kilowatt system, argument's sake, you're using half the number of modules, which means half the number of mounting structures, etc. So these technology advancements have really enabled us to cut down on those costs, and the impact was that these savings have been passed on, either to the client in the form of capex, or to the financiers in the form of PPAs, that come in at lower tariffs, which means that we're getting closer to a cost competitive tariff, with the very highly subsidized grid tariffs in Africa, which has always been a challenge. And on the storage side, the feasibility or the viability of that really depends on the business case of the client. How much revenue is he losing if he doesn't operate for 2 hours during a power outage? And should really be benchmarking the cost of energy storage or batteries against the loss of production, the loss of revenue, and those types of sort of costs, rather than to try and benchmark batteries against the simple cost of grid energy. because it's not what it's designed to do. And once you put it in that light, it's a very, very different business case, and it almost always makes sense. The next question then is, how often do you have power outages or load shedding, and that's also very different from region to region, and it's sometimes hard to forecast. You're looking into this crystal ball. Are we going to have load shedding 1 or 2 or 50 times over the next year? And that's where these stacked value stacked benefits of storage come in. Can you also use these batteries to do some peak shaving and to do arbitrage to try and recover some of that investment cost, whilst altogether having it available to serve the primary purpose of being backup for your system to enable you to operate during that load shedding. So stack benefits is a key factor in assessing the viability. And as technologies advance, battery management systems, power management systems, PCS have become significantly more advanced, and they're smarter. They can do some forecasting, and that enables us to better manage the grid and to get the maximum value out of your battery whilst maintaining it, for the primary purpose of doing that, providing the backup service that you need. So I think that's it from me for this. Thanks, guys. It's been a very good panel to be on.
Thanks, Gabriel. That was really poignant. I hope you can stack up to that, Henry. Go ahead,
Yeah.
sir.
All right. So one thing I would like to track back to something Norman mentioned earlier, which is interoperability between equipments. We so to say have a strong downplay of how this has an effect on the entire cost of renewable energy projects. The fact that one equipment can easily communicate with the next one, whether you like it or not, it increases your overall cost of whatever project you're about to deploy. So, and which is a very key fact for JA Solar as a solar module manufacturer. So we are not just going to go about manufacturing solar modules without having to have intense conversations with especially PV inverter manufacturers to understand what their projections are like. So you don't want to manufacture solar panels that in about 2-3 years, you have inverters that are able to carry that being phased out of the industry. So there has to be that collaboration. And one of such, there's already existing collaboration of such within the PV manufacturing space. So you have JA as one of the tier 1 solar module manufacturers. We have great collaboration with also other tier 1 manufacturers in terms of the technologies we are able to push out. So one of such things is that you also want solar modules to be able to also interact with themselves as well. So we have that within the solar module manufacturing space, but we need to also improve on what we have between different OEMs. So from PV manufacturing to battery manufacturing to inverter manufacturing, there needs to be that great collaboration between all three, because they are like the major components you would need for every renewable energy project. So for me, it will be that. And there's also one key point we all try to push to the background as well, which is logistics. That's a very, very key component to achieving low levelized cost of energy. If you don't have good logistics, it becomes you have good equipment, quite cheap, but you are not able to move them from the point of manufacturing to the point of project implementation. Without having good transportation or good logistics, it makes the project also look quite expensive. So, which is one of such where JA Solar as a module manufacturer, where we have incorporated having larger scales or bigger solar modules, about 550 watt and thereabout. So let's say 2-3 years ago, you are only able to ship at about, let's say 200 kilowatt peak per 40 footer container. But at the moment, you're able to ship way much than 300 kilowatt peak for a container. So whether you like it or not, that is some great improvement in terms of how much power you're able to move from the point of manufacturing to also to the point of project implementation. So we need to still find ways to make sure that logistics is well considered, and also the cost of logistics is also driven down greatly. Thank you very much. It was a very nice session, and to my co-discussers, it was nice having you guys on board.
Fantastic. And we are 1 minute ahead of schedule. Thank you, everyone. Collaboration definitely should not end here. I see some questions in the chat from Tony. So feel free to reach out to the panelists, everyone that's watching, and panelists alike. I will also be reaching out with regard to some learnings maybe we could get as the Uganda Solar Energy Association. And so, yeah, thank you very much for your time and for honoring us with a lot of this, free knowledge and vital details on how to go about solving the issues that we all face together. Thank you all.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much to all our esteemed panelists for this wonderful session, and a very special thanks to Alan sir for superbly managing the session. So with this, we have come to the end of day one of Africa Rooftop Solar Congress. Don't forget to join us tomorrow for exciting and insightful panel discussion on rooftop solar O&M and asset management, followed by the prestigious award ceremony. Till then, bye from our end. Now the floor is open for networking. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.